Hi there and welcome back to Japan, where we're going to be doing our final conclusion on the track-by-track listen through to BAND-MAID's much anticipated Conqueror album. Now this one is one that, as I say, is the last video in a track-by-track listen through playlist, so if you haven't already been following that and you want to check out my track-by-track reaction opinions, then go back and check out the playlist in the description below where you'll be able to see all of the reviews. But this is that final one where if you're new to the channel, I sit down and I listen to the album over and over again after those initial reactions to give a proper review. And what that involves is it involves going to loads of different locations and listening to the album over and over, listening to it in different environments, at home, outdoors, in different places, on the bus, when I'm shopping, sometimes focusing on really good headphones, sometimes playing it in the background on cheap headphones, really trying to get in every context that the album can be appreciated in and see what my final conclusion is. And this was an important one for that because, like I say, this album was very, very much anticipated. And I'm not really surprised. This is kind of a big deal when you think about what this album actually is. BAND-MAID have been growing for quite a long time. And one of the things that was noticeable is halfway through their career, they went from having songs written for them, being this really, really talented group of musicians who had their songs written for them, to writing their own songs. And this is the third album on which they have been really primarily responsible for writing their own songs. And the two albums directly before were, I don't think they were just fan favourites because the band wrote them. They were really up to snuff. They were fantastic. Just Bring It, really great album. World Domination, like I say, a little bit undisciplined, a little bit flabby in its length, and it perhaps didn't have as much variation as it could have done, but it showed a lot of ambition, and it did show in its highlights a real progression in their songwriting. So when it came to this new album, Conqueror, I think a lot of people were excited, myself especially, because it seemed that the focus on this, regardless of, I know a lot of people had said the album was written to be like an instigator for new, favourite live songs, but I think that this was more about developing their sound, developing their writing, and trying to experiment and do more things. Because if there had ever been one weakness during this phase in BAND-MAID's career when they've been writing their own songs, in all fairness, it probably was the fact that there was a little bit of, shall we say, a uniformity to some of their writing, especially in the singles that the record company most likely was picking to go out. There was a feeling that they never really varied much off of that, and that's despite them showing signs of wanting to do so. Songs like Start Over I regularly have mentioned. The BAND-MAID EP was a really good example of that as well. And obviously also a lot of you guys have mentioned in the comments, you guys who know more about the band, obviously I just comment on the music from the position of being someone who's worked with music my entire life. However, you guys have mentioned that before, the last two albums have been written on a rather tight schedule as well, kind of crammed in again between the live focus of touring and making that money. So, with this album and a change of record company, as far as I'm aware, or at least change of the part of the record company we're in, whatever, the focus had been put on giving them more time to do this album, more time to write it, more time to create it, and that was something I was really excited about, seeing how they were going to do that. So, we're going to talk about that more, but as always, with something that's important, I have my notes, and there's a few things that I want to go through in order. Now, first one I just want to point out, with BAND-MAID, a lot of the time, the big thing is they are very much a sum of their parts. Often the product, the final result, is much more than the sum of the parts, as all great things are. However, everyone does notice the individual members, and each of the individual members add something very distinct to the band's sound. So I wanted to break that down and look at the positive and negative, and that's the whole point of this review. As always, we're looking at the positive and negative. As you guys probably already know, if you know me and you've seen my reaction to the album already, you know that basically I love this album and it's a very strong contender for my favourite release of the year. However, we're here to discuss things and bring things into conversation, so I'm going to be focusing, rather than just saying everything's great, on the little concerns and things that I think maybe need developing as well, however petty they may be. Just interesting to see whether we agree. So let's, like I say, talk about the individual members first of all. Now, first of all, I'm going to start off unsurprisingly with Akane, #NoBias, but you guys already know, let's be honest, you guys know I'm a big fan of her work. I think that she is an absolutely outstanding, exceptional musician, and with good reason. She is truly brilliant at what she does, but that does mean that the bar is set very high for what we expect for her. Now, also, on top of that, I've been reading a lot of the comments around the album, trying to get a rough idea for what other people feel as well, so I can maybe address some of those issues. And a lot of people have been very much saying that this album seems to be like Akane's win. Like, Akane is the artist who shines most on this album. I would say that she does what she always does. I mean, her bar is pretty much set at anything less than perfection is a bit of a disappointment. And her performance here is pretty much solidly brilliant throughout. I don't think that she's necessarily stepped up to a level that she wasn't at before, so much as been given more opportunity to do things. There's more of a variation in the tempo of the songs on this album than there ever has been on the previous two albums, which were kind of focused mostly to a fairly similar tempo throughout. Here there are some slower songs and a little bit more of those sort of punky, thrashy, charging songs as well, and she takes advantage of that to really highlight her skills. Combined with the fact that the mix is very on her side here, it seems that the whole way this album has been mixed more than any one of them before is very much with the focus on the beat cutting through. And that, to me, is one of the big reasons why everyone has noticed her performance. Now, this is not to take anything away. I mean, I would say, given, like I say, the extra opportunities she's been given, this is definitely Akane's overall best performance. But I would say she has just basically gone and delivered the exact level of perfection we'd expect from her. Usually, sort of extracting the most out of the songs, and that's really the quality. I mean, there's some tracks. I think it was track 3 on the album. I'm trying to remember. I'm really bad at remembering song names, as you guys know, but I tend to remember the number that comes up on the screen when I'm going through the track-by-track listen-throughs. And she just sort of had a fairly straight rock beat to do, but she added like a little double snare thing, and that on its own, where there didn't really need to be that, it just excelled and added something to the song. Great fills. There were some moments I point out where I think she might have gone slightly overboard, but that was a very small criticism and a little bit of nitpicking. Now, moving on to Misa. Misa, again, I think she did a fantastic job. And I think a lot of people perhaps weren't mentioning her as much, primarily because of the fact that on this album, you couldn't really hear her. I'm going to have a bit of coffee for a second, because I've got a lot more talking still to do. You couldn't hear her so much in this album, and that was partly down to that aforementioned mix. The mix was very much trying to go for a slightly bigger sound here, and as we've mentioned before, and this will be coming up on the future videos I'll be doing about basic music theory in case you're not au fait with this kind of thing, when it comes to mixing, it's not just about volumes, it's about frequencies. And the more sounds you try to put into something, the more areas you need to make in your frequency. Imagine your EQ with your little sliders. The more room you have to make for certain sounds and certain things to need to move in a direction. And usually what suffers most is the bass. The bass is usually pushed more and more into the deep end and therefore the less audible end to make room for extra sounds that an artist might want to employ. And as this was less of a raw sounding album, I do think that resulted in Misa's sound being more subliminal. However, on the listen throughs where I sat down and really focused on the album, I could see that what she was doing, or should I say, I could hear what she was doing, was absolutely fantastic. It was exceptional, it was brilliant, and I think she was on probably the best form I've ever heard her on any of the albums. Because she was filling in that space that a real bass player can do, you know, the real great bass players can do, which is that I guess anyone can do a solo. A good solo needs a really good bassist, but a bassist who can link the drum beat to the melody and the chord pattern and extract a lot from the song whilst also managing to not really even be noticed, that's a fantastic thing. So again, massive credit to Misa. I think she was probably the unsung hero of this album. She added a lot to it. Now moving on from there let's move on to Saiki, because Saiki, again, this is another case of a member in the group who I think she really excelled. The difficulty with Saiki has always been that her voice is so, it's so good all the time. She's got such a thick sounding big voice, and she delivers it so on point every time that there's often not a huge amount to say about her. She just kind of nails every song. Perhaps the one negativity that's always been working against Saiki has been the fact that BAND-MAID, let's face it, in their writing style, they're not the most overly melodic band. It's not their strong point. Their strong point tends to be more on the sort of thickness of the arrangement and the rhythm. So this was, to me, again, in a similar way to how I said Akane had more to work with, I think suddenly Saiki had more to work with. She had more to step up to here. The melodies were more interesting than I think they had ever been prior to this album, and she really did step up to it. There were little moments with little falsetto bits where her voice went almost out of her singing range, where she held it fantastically. There were low notes that she dived down to and really grabbed, and one of the things that I really liked was although this is more about that rhythmic side of things again, when those sort of punchy, fast rhythms came in, of which there were more on this album again than there ever had been, she was really, really tight with that. Her delivery had a real sort of spit to it, it had a real sort of precision to it. Now that might have come down again to the fact this had a very bright mix on this album. There was a lot of sharp sounds on this album, which was one of the best things about the mix, but I do think that a lot of it was in the quality of her performance. So like I say, I think that Saiki really stepped up to this and kind of showed that she could work in an area where BAND-MAID's previous material hadn't really pushed her. I don't think in any of the previous songs she'd really been pushed until this album, and she met it perfectly. Now, the two last members to mention, you probably noticed I left the guitars to last. Now, when it comes down to Miku, Miku, as I say, she's the core of the band. What she does is often the simplest. And that, I think, is a real quality that the band needs. They need, for all of this virtuoso, for all of this skill, they need someone who can hold down the middle, because otherwise it's just a lot of people being very clever with nothing for them to be clever around. And she did. She held down this centre here. Now, the difficult thing on this album is it was difficult to tell which bits were Miku and which bits were Kanami, because of the fact that the mix, the production, and this is the first time I'm going to mention it, but it's going to come up a few more times, the compression on this album was really heavy, meaning that the guitars kind of all turned into something of a bit of a blur at points, which means, like I say, except for the bits where there were obvious twiddling moments and obvious little bits of lead guitar, it was hard to pick out which bits were being done by who. However, there was a solid core to the song which I would attribute to Miku covering those roles, and there were moments where there was acoustic and electric, like on Page, the first song of the album, which really highlighted that there was good interplay working between Miku and Kanami. Whoever was doing what, they were obviously working together and creating thick and lush guitar sounds where possible. And the thing which I also mentioned a lot, Miku's backing vocals. Miku did some superb backing vocals. I think her vocal performance has stepped up a lot on this album compared to anything we've heard before. Now, why did I leave Kanami to last? Kanami, I keep on calling her Kaname, it's Kanami. Why did I leave Kanami to last? Much to the shock of many people, I know I've got a bit of a reputation on this channel for the fact that I often veer away from guitar-heavy things. And the reason I veer away from guitar-heavy things is because guitar is so ubiquitous. You know, every band has a guitarist, everyone's heard guitar, rock is a genre. If you're listening to rock music, where basically the only assured thing is there will be loud guitars. There will be solos everywhere. We've kind of heard it all before. So yeah, it's hard for a guitarist to stand out. I'm going to say this, in my opinion, on this album, with all of the fantastic musicianship that went in, for me the standout performance was Kanami. Why? Well, there were less solos on this album overall. But that's not the reason. The reason was that she managed to do that thing that we often credit to the bass and the drums. And the bass and the drums are kind of designed for this. They can be basic, but they can fill in the gaps, as we were saying that Misa and Akane did so well before. But Kanami, on this album, took on that role. She had the little bits in the little right places. She was filling in gaps with flourishes. Gone so much with the big solos. There were some great solos on this. In fact, some of my favourite solos she's ever done are on this album. If not my favourite, I'll have to come back to that after I've maybe done my BAND-MAID top 20 list, which will be coming up in the next couple of months. But it was the flourishes. It was the little bits she put in. It was the restraint. It was the knowing when to play, knowing when not to. It was knowing when to be heavy, knowing when to be light. It was dealing with those mid-tempo songs in a way that worked. It was that. And I think this comes back to the same Kanami who we see on like Mochi Tochi, sitting there strumming away on the acoustic. Except this to me felt less like she was just sort of doing what was required of her, and more like she was enjoying, trying to exemplify the mood of each song. Because anyone can be heavy all the time. Being heavy and being loud is actually one of the easiest things to do. I mean, look at punk. Punk is notoriously the easiest genre to play, and yet it's probably the most in-your-face genre. Being loud is not so much a skill. Knowing how to be restrained so that the loud hits harder, that's a skill. And I think that's where Kanami, to me, really owned this album. I think it was in her restraint and in her ability to add variation and add colour to the song that really gave this album a lot of its major qualities. Now, I've mentioned the members. I had to mention that because it is such a big thing when you're talking about BAND-MAID. We're going to move on, however, to the songs and notably my highlights. Now, you guys probably know, I'm just getting these song names in front of me here on the screen, but you guys probably know the ones that I liked the most on the first listen. However, what I liked most after repeat listens really surprised me. Now, like I say, I deliberately, to help myself, I took the song names off of the playlist. I was listening to them just with the track numbers. And then, literally just before doing this now, I reunited myself with the track names so I could remember what I said about the original reviews and sort of connect it all up. And even I was shocked. Now, the one that is perhaps not surprising is the song that I think is absolutely fantastic. And if at the time that I post this, it hasn't already come out as a single, I absolutely think it must. And that is Page, track 1. It's absolutely blistering. I know that maybe my usual biases point me towards this song. I'm someone, I like a good catchy hook, I like a big song, and I like something that has, like I say, those other sounds to make the rock sound heavier. This has great stuff going on. It has the fantastic little harmonies and weird sounds that, you know, come in underneath the vocal to start it off. It has some interesting things going on all the way through. It has that wonderful play between the acoustic and electric. It has an absolutely stonking chorus that, as of yet, and I've listened to this album now a lot of times, probably more than even the hardest core fans. I've been listening to this thing on bloody repeat play for a while. That song hasn't got even close to being old yet, in my opinion. The second verse perhaps is the only letdown in that song, in that it turns acoustic. Maybe they could have done something a little bit more colourful and interesting with the second verse, but still, that song is an absolute brilliant, and if it doesn't come out as a single, I will be absolutely bewildered. I suspect they're saving it up as the last hurrah for this album, is that Page will come out as a single just to reignite sales somewhere down the line, once maybe the initial sales have started to dull a little bit. Now, the next one that really caught me was actually that track number 4, Endless Story. That was a song that when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, it's catchy, but it's not like monstrously catchy. And yet it's one of the songs that I think when it comes on, certainly like the first couple of songs in this album, the album starts really strong. But when Endless Story comes on, it really grabs you. And it is a song that the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. And I loved the chorus. I thought the chorus was fantastic. I think the whole thing just kind of works. And it's amazing because for a song that was released as a single, it at first didn't feel like it had a huge amount of bite and impact. And yet it has grown on me. And it is very rare for a song that genuinely grows on you and genuinely becomes one that you love to be picked up by a record company as a single. But I think they did a good choice here. And I hope that anyone like me who perhaps didn't get immediately wowed by it on first listen, I hope they listen to it more, because actually it really burrows in, it sticks with you, and it has got a good feeling to it. Which brings me to the next song I wanted to mention, and this one, I'm really happy this came up, because this song, I think, was the first one they released from the album, and this is going back a long, long way, and I was still trying to work out, you guys already know what this is probably already from what I'm saying, but I was trying to work out what I thought of the band when I first heard this. So being reunited to this, I was surprised how hard it hit me, and that was Bubble. Bubble is an absolutely brilliant song, and if we were looking at the sort of the band-made songs, that one to me really stands out. It's just fantastic, and actually I would argue it probably is. I know a lot of people have mentioned how cool it is that Rene at the end of the album is really, really heavy. I would say that Bubble has significantly more hit than Rene does, and I gave Bubble a relatively lukewarm reaction when I heard it the first time. Again, similar thing to Endless Story. They do have some similar writing techniques. They both have a bit of that whoa, millennial whoa thing going on in the background. Nothing wrong with that, especially if you're playing to an international audience. The whole reason why that whoa thing became so popular for bands like The Offspring around the turn of the millennium is because of the fact that you can go to international territories and everyone can sing along to the woes if nothing else. And you know, to me, it was... The thing about Bubble is that actually I think it hits harder than any of the other songs on the album. It's the one that I noticed, and I do sometimes say this, when I do the more relaxed listen-throughs that I do, it was one of those songs where I was doing relaxed listen-throughs, and every time I came to that song, even if I wasn't really paying attention, if I was just listening to it in the background while I was doing my shopping or whatever, that was one of the ones that just suddenly grabs you. It's like, bam, there it is. Oh, wow. It hits you, especially when it comes into the chorus. I think that's a fantastic single, and I think it's a real grower, and I really enjoyed that song. I loved it, actually. So Endless Story and Bubble really shocked me by being the two standout ones that really sort of grew on me over time. And I must say, I've forgotten the name of it already, but I'm going to go back. A credit to Blooming as well. Blooming is a fantastic single. I think in the end, I perhaps don't hold it quite as in higher regard as the three that I just mentioned, Page, Endless Story, and Bubble, but it still is absolutely fantastic and, a really great single to come out. Like I say, I think every song on this album is good. It has quite a lot of variation in the album. It does flow very well. But, those three to me are the ones that after repeat listens, they're the ones that I think I was looking forward to most of all. However, we have to talk about something now, which is that there is one song on this album that pretty much after a few listens, and I do try not to skip anything. I try not to skip anything because I think to myself, circumstantially it might feel different each time, but it became one song that after like the fourth or fifth listen to this album, I just couldn't listen to it anymore. It was ruined. It was a ruined song, and you think, again, if you've been watching me track by track, I think you know what I'm going to say. It's not Miku's fault, it's not Akane's fault, it's not Kanami's fault, it's not Saiki's fault, it's not Misa's fault, and I'm pretty 99.9% sure that it's not Tony Visconti's fault. Yeah. Dragon Cries. I can't listen to that song. It's absolutely destroyed. The problem is that, don't get me wrong, the rest of the album, there are some issues that we'll come on to about compression. And some of them, some of the other songs do sound, they have similar problems when it comes to that mastering, that final process, the squash of the sound to Dragon Cries, but none of them seem to be as bad. Now, the reason I say I don't put this at Tony Visconti's door, and I do want to talk about this for a second, the reason I don't put this at his door, because the production, as in the tones, the sounds, the way that everything's been put together, is so nice and is so crisp. And given his previous backing record, I can't imagine it's him who did it. And usually a record company wouldn't make the producer do the mastering, that final process where the sound is, if you like, sheened. They wouldn't make him do that. There's that last person who does the little things like the compression just to make it sound ready for radio. The tiny little subliminal things, which unfortunately does involve often compression being placed on the entire track in retrospect. And so I'm imagining they picked someone else, maybe because this song was recorded, or I believe it was all recorded and engineered separately in America. Maybe the record company picked an American person to do the mastering. I need to check the booklet to see if this was someone different involved. Please, guys, tell me if you know who did this. And maybe the record company were doing it to pander to the American or Western market, because I know Western markets are used to hearing more compression. And again, I'm willing to concede that compression has its place. For people who listen to music kind of in the background, who listen to it driving in their car, listen to it on headphones while it's sitting on the train, listen to it while they're doing the cooking or something, compression does help a song sound more clear in those situations. But when I have paid money, good money, to buy a copy of the CD, and this is what really bugs me, when I've bought a copy of the CD and it comes to my home in a format that clearly, this is a dated format that clearly is only for people who want high quality, and clearly no one has a CD Walkman. I'm not going to go out walking with this CD. This is clearly for me to listen to in good quality. Why do I have to listen to something which is unbearably destroyed? To give you an idea, because I know some people might think I'm overreacting to this, listen to Akane's playing, which I'm sure is fine, but listen to the cymbals, the hi-hats, the all of that. It doesn't sound like she's playing the drums. It sounds like she's got an untuned analog television and just stuck the white noise in front of the microphone. There's no definition. Everything just sounds like a hiss. When Saiki reaches for the higher and louder notes, as her voice goes up, you hear the rest of the music literally being squashed down, because that's what it is. Compression is compressing all the sound, so if one becomes more dominant, the others have to be squashed to make room for it. The whole sound is destroyed. Of that song, a song which could have been really impactful. Actually, ironically, of all the songs in the album, that's probably the one that needed the least compression, because that's all about impact. It's all about the variation between the hard bits and the quiet bits. I really, really despair of this, and although, like I say, I'm willing to give room for anyone who says that it deserved compression, I do think that if you're going to... The CD copy, I think this should become a thing now. CD copies should not have over-compressed songs. Fine, if you're going to do a version on streaming, or you're going to do one for an MP3 download, fine. CD copies, can we just have the song sounding like the bloody song? Because that, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I couldn't listen to it after a few listens. It just started to annoy me. That song is officially ruined. Sorry, I can't listen to it. And like I said, I don't put, unless someone's going to tell me something I don't know, I don't put the blame at Tone, I keep on forgetting his name, Tony Visconti, isn't it? Tony Visconti's door. I don't put it at his door, but someone has to be held accountable for the fact that song's been trashed. And I hope that someone from the studio, of which there will be people, someone manages to get a copy of that multi-track from that song out where it can be dealt with properly, and we can hear what the song should have sounded like without any mastering. Or maybe it'll get remastered for a best of in 10 years' time and we'll hear it properly. Anyway, a couple more points that I wanted to mention. This has been quite a long final review, but like I said, there's a lot that I wanted to cover on this one. One of the things that came up on this, because like I say, the engineering was a little bit over the place. It was inconsistent for the best part of the album, but it was a bright sounding album. It was clear sounding, even if it was compressed. I don't think as a general the album was too bad. I wish it had been less compressed. Yes, I wish it had more life. I think sometimes the compression sucked some of the life out of it and made some of the songs sound more samey than they otherwise would have done. But basically that's not a criticism overall, because the album, you know, the album still sounded lively enough to be enjoyable with exception to that one track. But what really struck me is what I want to move on last and most importantly to is to the writing. Now, one thing that came across heaviest of all about the writing was that there had been clearly something that had been slightly lacking in BAND-MAID songs before that I hadn't even noticed until this album came along and strangely corrected it without me even realising that it did. And that is that there was more feeling in this than I think. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I know BAND-MAID have had quite emotional songs before, but as a general, most of the songs kind of rock along, and it's kind of it's kind of got your sort of middle finger sarcastic edge to a lot of them, more than the emotional ones. I felt that this album, even when they were rocking, even the rocking songs, there was a feeling that everything had more emotion in it. And that for me was a real win. And one of the biggest emotions that came through in this album, both in the fast songs and the slow songs, is that this album had a sense of hope. The overall feeling you get in most of the songs is a sense of hope, a sense of progress. Even without understanding the lyrics, it's an album that makes you feel good. It makes you feel lively. It pumps up that energy, you know, sort of gets the blood going in a good way. And that is a really, really powerful quality for this album to suddenly have. Like I said, I'm not saying that their other work hasn't had this, but this much more viscerally. You could feel the emotion in this album in a way that I don't think it had ever been so clear in any of their previous work. So for me, the biggest win about the writing of this album was the emotion, was that feeling, was the feeling that everything had you more pumped up. You felt more involved, and I think that is probably the biggest thing they got out of having extra time to work on this album. Ironically, the one song, I can't remember its name, it might have been Catharsis, apologies if I'm getting that wrong, I think it was Catharsis, the one that was written very much at the last minute, very quickly, kind of most held a similarity to the emotion of their previous songs and just not being hectic and angry, which is absolutely fine, they do that brilliantly. But ironically, that was the one recorded most in a similar mood, in a similar setting to their previous songs, Rushed. You know, they had to write and record everything very quickly. So it kind of had that similar feeling of being kind of like tense. And yet the other songs on this album were much more hopeful. So I think the difference in approach to this album gave them the ability to convey an emotion, a very valid and wonderful emotion that they'd never really been able to put onto their albums previously with quite so much impact as it has been here. So like I say, hope was the big feeling that I got from this album. I thought it was fantastic. Now, one of the big things I want to cover, like I say, when it comes to the writing is, was it varied? Because this is the big thing. I really wanted to hear a varied album. I wanted to hear these fantastic musicians who had, to my mind, been brilliant musicians and became songwriters. I wanted to hear them really mastering songwriting by breaking out of the pigeonhole, the shell of just being a hard rock band. Now, you can approach the variation on this album in one or two ways, to be honest. Now, if you're starting as someone who's essentially, you're into hard rock or you're into metal, and that's pretty much what you listen to, then for you this would be a very eclectic album, I think. And I don't mean that with any disrespect, but I mean that it takes the styles and sounds and themes that you're probably used to and takes them in different directions. However, if you're someone who maybe is into quite a wide range of styles of music, you know, then you're probably going to still feel that this is primarily a hard rock album. And again, I don't mean that as any disrespect. I know they're a hard rock band. I think it's more that I can see, and I think a lot of people can see, that they have the talent to do various other things, more than just infusing them into their style. And one of the examples I wanted to point out is obviously with Kanami playing piano. We've only heard, as far as I'm aware, her play piano on one song ever in the history of the band. Start Over, to mention that again. Now, on an album like this, I felt that, a lot of the time, like I say, there were moments where, due to the compression, the guitar kind of all just sounded like it crumpled into one. At those particular moments, I was thinking to myself, well, wouldn't it be better to have Kanami playing a different instrument? And I do worry and wonder whether it's maybe something where they feel like they have to maintain the hard rock image, and for having Kanami, the virtuoso guitar soloist, doing something other than guitar solos and guitar at all, could perhaps give off the wrong message. So in a way, I hope they're not being influenced by a concern about fan backlash to not do these things, but I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen them fill out the sound more, because, to be honest, the only other sounds that came into this album that we hadn't heard before were mainly in the form of production. Little keyboard effects, little extra sounds that were put in, things that were added by the producer, to be honest. That was the majority of the different sound that we heard in this album. However, the writing, it can't be taken away, the writing had massively, massively grown here. And again, I can't help but say that the time that they were given to write this is probably as important as the maturity they've gained over the years. Now, I just feel like there was so much more here. There was so many more different ways of approaching things. They've always had clever techniques, but they grew extra techniques in this. They had extra styles of song. They had more songs with varying tempo. This album, really, you don't know what tempo is going to happen on each song. You don't know quite how they're going to approach the bridge. The bridges aren't all so formulaic here, and like I've said so many times on so many different reviews, a bridge can make and break a song, make or break a song, and they had a feeling to what they were doing here, that every song kind of felt like the identity wasn't just in giving it a good hook. The identity was really in writing songs from the ground up. It wasn't like they started from any formula with any of these songs, but instead just made each song, from an idea and really expanded it into its own thing. And again, this is not to disrespect anything that they've done before, but I just feel that you can feel the development here. You can see things that maybe we didn't need before, but I'm just happy they're here. I'm happy the extra techniques, I'm happy this growth is here, because they've taken something that already worked and they have made it better. And that really is my final conclusion on this. I think, with exception to that one little rant I have about that one song and the way that it's mastered, and with some slight issues with the overall compression of the album, but hey, it's 2019 and most music is streamed after all, how much can we really complain? I don't think there's anything really too obvious to complain about this album. Every one of the members delivers 110%. They show growth for the best part. The songwriting, which in my opinion is always more important than even the musicianship, how well are the songs written, it's grown. I mean, like I say, World Domination was quite a flabby album. It had its fillery moments, dare I say. But that was an album where, when it was on point, it was really on point. And I feel that this album has actually walked forwards from there, and it's carried that in the right direction. And World Domination was not an easy album to follow. I have to really say that, as I said at the beginning of this review, I'm here to sort of bring up facts, bring up interesting, opinions and subjective, objective, however you look at it, bring up things that we can discuss and various things that we can say, hey, could that have been better? Where do we see them going in the future? And I think it's only going to get better if they can keep on this trajectory. Talk about those things, and I think there is a lot to be discussed about what further steps they can do to make the next album even better than this. However, just as someone who picked up a CD out of a package in their front doorway, as you guys saw on that first video review of Page, the first one in the playlist. And like I said, if you want to check out a track-by-track playlist, again, follow the link in the description below. As a person who just picked up that album, I am nothing but impressed and happy with it. Yeah, I feel sorry that one song can't be re-listened to because it's been destroyed by crappy studio decisions. But I'm still left with 14 songs, of which at least 3, to be honest, at least 5 I would actually claim to be pretty much timeless. Real rock songs that I can imagine coming back to again and again and again. and with 3 real standout songs that every time I listened to the album grabbed me 100% and made me so happy that I listened to it every single time. You know, it's so rare, especially now, and you know, considering the state that a lot of music is in, I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy because I'm not like massively into a lot of, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, 70s and things of the heyday of rock music, and you know, I'm not 100% into the way things were back then either. But, you know, with the way that the music scene is now, and with there being a lot more artists in our limelight than ever before, and with a lot of crap going around, and with the general state of rock music, you know, it doesn't get so much into the charts so more, it's become more of a niche thing, and, you know, there's more and more artists who are doing it in more and more of a generic way. I can't help but feel that this album is probably one of the most positive things that we've heard, that I've heard, and that's come out. And I say this right after, you know, I thought that Baby Metal's new album, Metal Galaxy, was really fantastic as well. I really enjoyed it. But obviously they're starting from a very different place. They're producing something which is quite commercial. You know, the way they're doing it's brilliant. They do a great job. But BAND-MAID are really at the cutting edge of representing Japanese self-writing, self-playing, just, you know, self-contained artists. And they've made a further step forwards. And I think that is just something that we can all be happy about. So yes, I'm very happy and very much looking forward to hearing your discussions about the various points we brought up here. I'm so glad that you've listened through this whole thing. If you've skipped to the various points, again, thank you anyway for listening to me waffle, but it's been really, really wonderful to go through this album with you. Really enjoyed discussing it with you, and I can't wait to see what you guys think as well. But overall, I'd be very surprised if anyone feels negatively about this album, but really interested to know what your highlights and what your negatives were. I picked up so many great comments from reading what you said on my track-by-track reviews, so I can't wait to see what everyone's overall feeling was. But to me, I've given you my honest breakdown of everything, but my overall feeling, my overall conclusion, they've got room that they can still go, and things are only going to get better. But this assures me and leaves me with the feeling that better is where things are going to go. The trajectory, said it right that time, continues to go upwards, and that space, those spaces they have left to fill for potential improvement, I think they're going to fill them. So I can't wait to see what the future brings. Anyway, thank you so much, like I say, for tuning in, and can't wait to see what you think in the comments, and as always, follow all those links below. But for now, from Japan and from this album, ciao ciao. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out more of our hundreds of videos we got online on this channel right now, or get involved in the discussion with us at the many social media links we've got in the description below, where you can suggest new videos and artists for us to check out on the channel. Or you can just do the usual YouTube stuff and, you know, comment, like, subscribe. You know how this works by now.